Shabbat Shalom. Probably by now, if you know me, you're aware that I'm a little bit of a movie buff. And if you didn't know before, well, now you do. I love watching movies. A couple weeks ago, we talked about The Godfather here in Shul. Excellent film. I love watching dramas. I'll watch comedies. I'll watch documentaries. But occasionally, I have to admit, I love watching really dumb movies. Movies that have the same plot device over and over. Movies like Godzilla. Have you ever watched a Godzilla movie? They've made approximately 30 million films about Godzilla. I looked this information up for this sermon. How many Godzilla movies are there, do you think? Take a guess. So there are 38 movies with the word Godzilla in the title, and they stopped counting all the other movies where Godzilla simply shows up. 38. Here's the whole plot of Godzilla. Giant lizard destroys Tokyo, or New York, or wherever. Why does he do it? Well, why not? Maybe it's because they don't make a toothbrush big enough for his giant teeth. I think the real answer is because people like me will go and see a movie where a giant lizard destroys New York for no real reason. I enjoy these movies because it's very therapeutic to watch a huge critter stomp on cars, eat entire trains, and if they don't use a big lizard, they'll use a big monkey. Like, what's the plot of King Kong? Big ape destroys New York City. Why? Well, why not? Somebody's got to climb the Empire State Building and swat at helicopters. And now they've realized that people like me really like when Godzilla and King Kong are in the same movie. So now there's Godzilla versus King Kong. They're mad for some reason. They're fighting, of course, in New York City. Why? Who knows? But the real reason is, of course, people like me will keep going to see these movies over and over. When I was growing up in the 90s and computer games were just starting to get cool, there was a game that my family had on our old Windows 95 PC, and it was called Sim City. In this game, you as the player were tasked with becoming a city planner, and you had to design your own city. You'd purchase land in the game, you'd plan roads, build buildings. It was actually pretty neat for a game of its time, and my older brother took this game very seriously, and to his credit, he made some really impressive virtual cities. Now, I was not good at this game. I was the annoying younger brother who tried to play it, but was pretty terrible at it. All of my cities that I made had roads leading to nowhere. The buildings were in disrepair, and the townspeople were always complaining, so I did not enjoy the game. However, I went on the internet and found a series of cheat codes which allowed me to be completely evil in this game. And one of the codes you could input would unleash a Godzilla-type monster into your city, and he would go around stomping and ruining everything. Or you could download a cheat that would create a typhoon or a hurricane, or you could do all three at once. Big monster, natural disasters. Mwah. Friends, for an annoying younger brother, this was a lot of fun. So my brother would build these amazing metropolis cities, and I would just unleash pure chaos into them. He'd come home after a long day of school, excited to play SimCity, only to see his city burning to the ground with Godzilla tap dancing on City Hall. I would pummel his suburbs with terrible atrocities. There'd be fires and storms and hurricanes, and he would get so angry with me, and he'd come into my room and attempt to pummel me or kick my tuchus into the next century, and I'd have to run to my mommy, which is the only reason I'm alive today giving this sermon. Now, I'm sorry your rabbi has so much SimCity blood on his hands. I have a lot to repent for on Yom Kippur. I hope I don't run into his fake city's residence in the next world, because I was an absolute butcher to these fake people. If you read Parshat Bo, our Parsha for the week, you might think that God was acting like I did, because God completely pummels the Egyptians as if they too were in a video game. Last week, we got 7 of the plagues that God inflicted on the land of Egypt, and while there were no large reptiles attacking their city, there were a bunch of tiny little amphibians, also known as frogs. But in addition to the frogs last week, there was the plague of the Nile turning into blood. We had lice, wild animals, killing of livestock, boils, and not just regular hail, but fiery hail. And now this week, we will conclude the plagues with locusts, darkness, and of course, as Josh spoke about, the final plague, the death of the Egyptian firstborn. Now, to the average reader of this story, this sounds particularly cruel and harsh. Obviously, not all of the Egyptians were evil and merited suffering to the extent that they experienced. And it seems as if God was acting like a bully in the sky, just raining down punishment purely because it gave the deity some sort of sick pleasure. But I don't think that's the case, and neither do the rabbis of our tradition. In the Mishnah, the rabbis discuss the scene in the Torah where Moses parts the Red Sea and the Israelites begin to cross. And after the Israelites have made it to the other side, the Egyptians, of course, pursue them. But as they're trying to go after the Israelites, the sea closes up on top of them and they all drown. According to this midrash from the rabbis, they say that the ministering angels in heaven witnessed this scene. They witnessed the Egyptians drowning in the sea, and they begin to sing and celebrate, joyful that the enemy has finally been defeated. God, however, is not impressed with the angels singing and celebrating, and God berates them for their actions, simply saying, "How can you sing when my creations are drowning in the sea?" The rabbis close the story by saying, quote, "God does not celebrate the downfall of the wicked." Dear friends, sometimes it might feel like God is picking on us, perhaps individually or as a whole. And stories like the one from our Parsha seem to emphasize that because God is all-powerful, that he utilizes that power for chaos. Now, I've got to admit, sometimes it does feel like God or life is just pummeling us with thing after thing. A flat tire? Really? I've caught another cold? Really? A jury summons again? God, really? Really? My family member is doing that now? Really? But I'll remind us that God's intentions with the plagues weren't only to punish the Egyptians for enslaving our people, but rather they were an attempt to coax Pharaoh into letting the Israelites go free and to start a new chapter in the Promised Land. Without these terrible plagues, we Jews could still very well be speaking Egyptian this morning. I think it's important to share with you all a verse from the book of Psalms. And this is a verse that I attempt to remind myself of when I'm feeling like maybe God is acting like a bully in the sky. It says, quote, "Adonai is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love." You see, my friends, God is the opposite of a bully in the sky. Unlike little me, God doesn't like to randomly punish or afflict people with terrible things. That is not God's way. If we experience atrocity, more often than not, those aren't God's actions. It's either an act of nature or an act of people who have evil intentions. So this morning, as we celebrate an incredible bar mitzvah, and he has been incredible, I'll remind us that every human being is created in God's image. Yes, even the ones we don't like. Yes, even the ancient Egyptians. And yes, even Pharaoh himself. God did not rejoice in their destruction. God simply wouldn't allow them to continue to oppress others. So in conclusion, the reason God fought with Pharaoh was the same reason Godzilla fought with King Kong. He was tired of his monkey business. Shabbat Shalom.